Hello everyone. Good news! I got the puppy cam working again, even though she's kind of not on her bed. Also, it's a little finicky. I'm not sure why it's like artifacting, but whatever, counts. Woo! Alright, so... Alright, walk with me through this. I'm about to take you on a mental journey. Alright, so... The Black Grail is not an actual item. It is a symbol. So there's the false Grail of Maldred. False Grail of Maldred was an actual artifact that is very powerful and has a very notable role within Bretonnian history, and if it were ever found, would also have a very notable power within the future of Bretonnia. But there is a Black Knight, which is Malobad the Serpent. And Malobad the Serpent, also known as the Black Knight, is the current ruler of Musion, and he's very, very scary, and he's up to a lot of shenanigans. His personal retinue of knights are known as the Black Knights. Sometimes and they are like his personal guard. But there's also an incident from the game Dark Omen, which the game Dark Omen is technically canon, which in the Dark Omen game series, which I think was like the very first Warhammer Fantasy PC game, had the Knights of the Black Grail, but they are actually some very, very ancient Grail Knights who were resurrected through dark sorcery into extremely powerful undead wights who used a symbol of a Black Grail on their heraldry, and they were kind of represented by a Black Grail. And they were super spooky bad guys until they are eventually defeated by you playing the Dark Omen games. Oh, okay, so Shadow of the Horned Rat was first, and then Dark Omens. Then, on top of that, you also have Duke Maldred and the False Grail incident, where there is an actual False Grail that Maldred uses to pretend that he has the favor of the Lady of the Lake. That is a genuinely powerful artifact because it seemed to have been created and or further empowered by his consort, who was a sorceress that was so powerful that she was able to impersonate the Lady of the Lake herself. Like, she's an extremely powerful sorceress. And so there's that character. Then on top of that, there is another incident in the Bretonnian Omnibus, which was actually the Knights of Bretonnia Omnibus by Anthony Reynolds. In the very end story, there is a story about the return of Duke Merovic, because Duke Merovic was an actual vampire. He was like a blood dragon vampire. And in that story, Duke Merovic returns, and he has a Black Grail. He shows up with a Black Grail that he uses to, just like the regular Grail, for his vampire knights. And it flows with blood. So I think that kind of like cultural zeitgeist has kind of fused all of these into one idea. What I suspect, I'd have to reread it to double check, but I suspect that Duke Maldred's Grail and the Black Grail from Merovic's story are the same thing. I believe Merovic acquired it and used it for his like resurrection or his return in the Callard series. But I would have to triple check on that. But I think that's where all those stories slam back into each other.
_Golgans cheered. X100. How do the Slann feel about the Dragon Emperor? Is he part of the Great Plan?
I don't... So, I would imagine that yes, the Dragon Emperor is part of the Great Plan, because we know, based on some notes from Andy Hall, that oh my gosh, the Cathayan, the Celestial Dragon Emperor actually had interactions with the he actually had interactions with, like, he actually met with the Old Ones and spoke to them and like treated with them, so they were keenly aware of him. I don't know if they would approve. I don't know if the Slann would approve of what he's doing, and we definitely know that he does not like the Lizardmen. Like, he doesn't, the Celestial Dragon Emperor doesn't hate the Lizardmen, but he also very heavily blames them for a lot of what happened. Because it was the arrogance of the old ones that even allowed chaos to come into existence in the first place. So he's still pretty bitter about that whole thing. Which, you know, fair. So because of that, it's not exactly clear. I actually really don't know how the Slann would feel about it. I feel like the Slann would probably consider him to be part of the Great Plan, but I imagine even despite that, there would probably be a lot of conflict between Cathay and the Lizardmen, though I think they would also team up when necessary. It would just depend. Yeah, literally the opening line from the Cathay reveal trailer. Oh, I can't actually damage towers. That's a bummer. At least not with arrows, apparently. The opening line from the Cathay trailer is literally about the old ones. Yeah, the Celestial Dragon Emperor is up to something. So, and him and the Moon Empress. We don't know what. He has not revealed. It has not been revealed. I suspect that's because the writers haven't like figured out what they think they're up to, based on how Games Workshop tends to do writing. But there is definitely, they're up to something. I need a meme made of like, have y'all ever seen the movie Chicken Run? Where the main guy's like, those chickens are up to something, but like it needs to be like Lord Mazdamundi saying it about the Cathayan dragons. Those dragons are up to something. About the Ghorgons. So Ghorgons are actually a lot scarier than most people think they are because of how they're made. Ghorgons are not naturally occurring creatures, so to speak. So they're not like, they're not naturally found out in the wild. They're actually just minotaurs. But you may wonder, looking at the other minotaurs, why is the Ghorgon so fucking huge? And also, why does it have 2 extra arms that end in terrifying blades? And the answer is, a Ghorgon is a minotaur that gets so completely obsessed and basically consumed by cannibalism that it feasts upon other minotaurs endlessly. Oops. Until it basically like evolves like a really fucked up Pokemon. But literally it's just a minotaur that has glutted itself so much on the flesh of other minotaurs that it basically forcefully mutates into that thing. All right, Great Taurus. Lore fact about them. The Darklands are a haven for monsters of all shapes and sizes. The Darklands are a haven for monsters of all shapes and sizes. Dragons and wyverns fight for dominance of the smoke-blackened skies, whilst orcs, goblins, trolls, ogres, and chaos dwarfs battle for control of the craters, volcanic crags, and ashen wastes. Yet in all this realm, it is the Great Taurus that reigns supreme. For it is less a living creature and more a manifestation of the Darklands' rage. The Great Taurus burns with a terrific intensity, so that its whole body is wreathed in fire and choking smoke. Indeed, so angrily and so hot does the Great Taurus's skin burn that swords and axes become molten and blunt in the very process of striking it. When the Great Taurus moves across the ground, sparks fly from its horns and red lightning plays about its hooves. As a Great Taurus swoops through the air, heat waves shimmer at its coming, and choking black clouds swirl in contrails behind it. With each snorting exhale, flame erupts out of the beast's flared nostrils, and an oily smoke curls from its gaping maw. In its rage, even the monster's eyes seem to smolder. As creatures of flame and ash, Great Taurus cannot stray far from the Darklands, save for when the winds of magic are at their strongest, for no other part of the world is suffused by the power that sustains it. The fire wind, also known as Akshi. Only by careful channeling of bright magic can a Great Taurus be lured into the old world or beyond, but the beast's raw might more than compensates for the effort involved. All right, here we go. Repanse de Lyonesse won fame as the dreaded Demoiselle de Grail, who rallied the battered armies of Bretonnia during the kingdom's darkest hour. This was when King Louis the Brave was slain in battle before Ghorgon, fighting a vast chaos horde invading Bretonnia from beyond the Sea of Claws. Louis's army was all but destroyed. Ghorgon was besieged, and to make matters worse, the king's heir was still a child, unable to lead the nation. Chaos raiders spread out across the land, burning and destroying. Everywhere, knights were hacked down as they bravely defied impossible odds. At this dark moment, amid the smoking ruins of a small village in remote Lyonesse, Repanse saw the Lady of the Lake. The lady appeared to speak, saying, "Repanse! Repanse! Rid my land of these foul foes, for they do offend me with their presence." Repanse was no more than 17 years of age, a humble shepherdess who was devoutly religious. Inspired by her vision, she donned armor that she found on a slain knight and grabbed the reins of a terrified warhorse which was running loose. She broke open the reliquary of the village Grail chapel and took up the sword she found within it.
Peasant! Peasant!
Yes, peasant. Snatching a tapestry hung on the wall, she fastened it to a lance and rode forth to rally the scattered and disheartened knights of Lyonesse. When the retreating knights saw a mere damsel bravely setting off to do battle with the mighty warriors of chaos, and one who was undoubtedly favored by the Lady of the Lake, they were shamed, and felt honor-bound to follow her to death or glory. While the ramparts of Ghorgon were cracking under the impact of the battering rams of the Chaos Lord, word was brought of a new Bretonnian army approaching fast and trampling beneath their hooves any foe in their path. As the great doors were about to give way, the banner of the dreaded Demoiselle appeared, leading a great host of knights arrayed in a single lance-head formation. They cleft their way through the Chaos ranks, scattering the Chaos army until Repanse was face to face with the Chaos Lord himself. When he raised his great sword above his grimacing visage, he was momentarily dazzled by Repanse's radiant aura, and she beheaded him with a single sword strike. Ghorgon was saved, and the remnants of the enemy were pursued to the sea and justly put to death. In gratitude, Louis the Young bestowed upon Repanse not only all the honors of knighthood, but also the dukedom of Lyonesse. And we see some other notes about her here. So we've got the fleur-de-lis banner. This banner bears the fleur-de-lis of the Lady of the Lake and was taken from the walls of the same Grail chapel where Repanse found the Sword of Lyonesse. The touch of the lady has made the banner as bright and shining as the day it was stitched by the maidens of Lyonesse. And then the Sword of Lyonesse is the Lady of the Lake led Repanse to a Grail chapel where she took up this ancient war blade, the sword of a devout and honorable knight of olden times. The lady guided Repanse well, for the sword has a great power over enemy magic. Isn't Repanse technically dead by the time this stuff happens? Yes, but to be fair, while that is true, the Lady of the Lake has demonstrated the ability to return knights from death. Like, that's basically what the Green Knight is. And we don't know how Repanse died, so like the whole, like, when there's a god involved who literally has demonstrated the ability to bring back people from death, you know, it's I think basically you could just argue that like Repanse's body was reinvigorated by the Lady of the Lake and she was sent back, which would not be beyond the lady's power, though she seems to do it very rarely. Also, fun fact, here's a fun fact. If you're wondering why Repanse's horse is named Suleiman, let me tell you where the horse gets his name from. So one of I believe one of Repanse's allies during the war was Baron Odo de Outremer. Odo was one of many Bretonnian knights who set out for the wars in Araby against the evil Sultan Jafar. Odo took part in the routing of Jafar's army in Astalia and joined in the great pursuit to the sea. When the Bretonnian knights ultimately followed Jafar into his own parched desert lands, Odo was there. No matter how hot the sun and despising both thirst and flies, Odo relentlessly sought out the champions of Araby to challenge and slay. Though they hid in their isolated oases, Odo tracked them down and forced them to do battle under the merciless sun. Odo was as chivalrous as he was determined, and he honored bravery and courage in a foe. When he met and defeated Suleiman, he was so impressed by the Saracen's courage that he spared his life. The two warriors became firm friends, especially since Suleiman, a man of honor, had no love or respect for the despot Jafar. When Odo returned from Araby, he brought Suleiman with him as a faithful brother in arms. And then Suleiman le Saracen. It just talks about what Suleiman is. Suleiman is an Arabian man armed with a massive double-bladed scimitar, which he's able to wield on horseback. And he rides a swift Arabian stallion instead of a regular warhorse. He has a blood-curdling war cry unique to the tribe of Araby from which he comes. Yada yada, just some special rules. But Suleiman is actually an Arabian who was an ally of hers, along with like Henry Le Massif and those nerds. Here we are. 2000 Imperial Calendar 2006 to 2007. The Battle of Lamentations. A vast plague fleet so foul that it leaves the sea black in its wake makes anchor off Bretonnia. Led by the Chaos Lord Karan the Blighted, the legions of Khorne and Nurgle defeat the Knights of Claron and lay siege to that city. Repanse de Lyonesse, the Demoiselle de Guerry, slays Lord Karan in single combat, and his army scatters as a result. Unfortunately, we don't have a ton of lore about Repanse because she was playable in 5th edition, and then she didn't appear after that. She only shows up in like very minor notes. Why is it that Nurgle's the only god that has a fleet? He's not. All the Chaos gods have fleets, but Nurgle is the most commonly taken to sea. And then you asked about the greatest duel. The greatest duel. All right, Spartan, I'll give you a choice. Would you like me to read you a wizard duel about how Balthazar Gelt became Supreme Patriarch, or would you like me to read you the moment that Karl Franz unlocked the full power of Galmaraz? All right, I'm only going to read the last little section of this. It's a long story. And I've already read a fair bit, so I'll just read the last section of it where Karl Franz goes like full badass mode. All right. So this is the end of yeah, because the full story would be like someone would have to do a pretty big redeem or like a pretty big tip for that. All right. Karl Franz spurred his horse towards the orc warlord. His arm was tired, but he couldn't remember how many boar riders he had dispatched with a mighty hammer, and now he could see that one more mob of them was coming towards him and his Reiksguard. These ones were impressive creatures, even bigger than the normal boar riders, and better armed and armored. There were more of them than he and his knights left. The situation was grim. Well, he would make sure they paid a high price for his life. "Sigmar and the Empire!" he shouted, closing his visor and spurring his charger towards the incoming orcs. The knights and the orc bodyguard clashed in a thundering clamor of steel against steel. But something strange happened around Karl Franz. The boar riders opened up in front of him and let him through, concentrating their attacks on the Reiksguard. The Emperor stopped his horse and was about to turn it, but then saw the orc warlord standing straight ahead in front of him, on the body of Marius Leitdorf. The monster raised its axe in a clear challenge directed at him. The Emperor understood, rode towards the warlord, and then dismounted, readying himself for the final confrontation. The two opponents studied each other for a few seconds. While all around them, the battle seemed to stop. An unnatural silence fell on the battlefield. All eyes turned towards the two champions. Everybody, orc and man, knew that this was the fatal moment when the battle would be decided. The two opponents were magnificent warriors, each of them representing the epitome of their race's fighting prowess. The Emperor was a tall, muscular man, clad in his full black full armor. He had removed his helm, knowing the importance of eye contact in single combat. On his chest, the silver seal was shining like a star, and the runes inscribed on Ghal Maraz, the mighty hammer of Sigmar, were burning bright. His opponent was towering over him, a mountain of green muscles. The steam of its breath made Karl Franz think of a savage beast ready to charge. The bits of armor strapped onto that immense body seemed more like decoration than real protection for its rock-hard flesh. The heavy axe in its hands was as tall as a man. Karl Franz noticed the crackling green energies playing along the edge of its blade and realized he would not have to deal with only muscular power. Detecting that the attention of the Emperor focused for an instant on the axe, the vicious orc seized the occasion and sprung towards the man. It moved at a speed unthinkable for such a huge creature, and its bellowing battle cry was in itself an assault on the man's fighting spirit. The instincts developed in years of training in the best fencing schools and the experience built on dozens of battlefields saved the Emperor. His shield arm rose just in time to stop the axe swinging towards his neck. The impact was terrible. The axe cut right through the shield bearing the insignia of the Emperor, destroying it, but the blade was stopped by the Emperor's armor. The silver seal countering the energies that would have allowed the fearsome axe to sever his arm. Karl Franz ignored the pain and struck back with Ghal Maraz. The hammer hit the orc on the shoulder, and the savage warrior screamed its pain to the sky. That gave the Emperor the time to recover and regain the distance he wanted to keep from his opponent. He didn't want the orc to get too close. He knew that if the monster grabbed him, that would spell his doom. The wound seemed to eliminate any trace of rational thought from the orc. It reverted to its most basic instinct and charged him with even stronger ferocity. The series of blows that followed were parried, dodged, and returned by the two opponents, in a duel that often got too fast for the troops around to follow clearly. After a few long minutes, it became clear to Karl Franz that he was slowly losing. His body felt numb where some of the orc's blows had reached him. He could feel his own blood flowing in the leggings of his armor. His strength was waning, while his monstrous opponent kept attacking relentlessly. Finally, the Emperor began giving ground, and eventually fell on one knee. At that sight, a cry of pain came from the Empire troops. The orc warlord, foretasting victory, prepared the last strike. Karl Franz was overwhelmed by pain. He understood that he was losing the duel because his race had lost that bloodlust, that same savage spirit that filled his opponent with strength. Civilization had brought many advantages on mankind, but men nowadays relied more and more on black powder and other technological means to fight for them, and the warrior spirit of their barbaric ancestors was not as strong as it used to be. If only he could have the same strength as that of Holy Sigmar of old, who vanquished this very same enemy millennia ago in this same mountain pass. If only he could regain the spirit to save his subjects and protect his land. His silent prayer was sincere and was not ignored. Karl Franz did not know where the new energy came from. Was it from the hammer he was still holding in his hand, or was it from within the recesses of his own soul? He could not tell. All of a sudden, the pain was gone. His muscles flexed with unearthly strength, and a primal fighting spirit filled his heart. The Emperor rose once more to meet the orc. The warlord stopped. He could not believe what he was seeing. He had been fighting a man in armor, so why was the figure standing before him that of a gigantic warrior dressed in furs? This was not the same person. This was taller, more powerful, but the hammer he raised in the air was the very same legendary weapon. The man shouted a loud battle cry that boomed among the mountains as it had done so many centuries before. On Bergen! At that sound, the instincts of the warlord were overcome by memories inscribed in the soul of his race. Memories of mighty barbarians defeating the orcs in war for the domination of the rich plains, driving them into the desolation beyond the mountains. In those times, men were led by this very same champion, he who had denied the possession of this land to the green-skinned race. If the orc warlord could have known such an emotion, it would have been the moment he would have felt fear. Instead, his reaction was rather one of hesitation. A split second of hesitation that was to cost him everything. Galmaraz struck home on the orc's forehead with a thundering crack. The green giant fell, life quickly abandoning his crushed skull. The orc stared through his own blood at the enemy that had vanquished him. Once again, he was seeing the wounded man in the black armor, not the godlike barbarian warrior. The orc could not understand the power that defeated him and raised a claw in a last attempt to fight back, but all his strength had gone and his arm fell back powerless. Then he saw no more. The battle was over. Their leader defeated, the orcs scattered and kept fleeing until they were back in their bleak territories. The men, too tired to pursue, took care of their wounded, starting with their glorious emperor. From that day on, the name of Karl Franz has been pronounced in the Empire with even greater pride, for all heard tales of that duel. And even though in years to come the stories about the battle were embellished and exaggerated, everyone always agreed that on that day Sigmar himself had fought alongside his warriors. And this was back in the badass days when they would like make a lot of unique art. So look at this, chat. One of the artists actually made art of I think it's Vorbad Ironjaw versus Karl Franz. So this is right before Karl Franz kills him. Isn't that amazing? All right, I will talk to y'all later. Thanks so much for watching and have a good one. Bye-bye.